happy and quite pleased that we have quite the visitor coming in from U.S. Soccer. Caitlin Carducci has been here with us before. She's a little worn out. She did a 14-mile run this morning in the nice cold air and tried to get the hills. So she conquered it quite well. Former attorney by trade, but she's now doing all the membership stuff for U.S. Soccer, and she's going to talk to us about the safe sport and everything. So we'll just welcome, I'll just turn it over right now to Caitlin. Thank you.
Do I need a microphone in here, or with the walls closed, is it enough? Am I good? If for some reason I need to grab it, I happily will, but then I'm holding less things. All right, so this is a very official sounding starting slide, the athlete and participant safety policy of the Safe Soccer program. Those are our U.S. Soccer terminology that we use for these things, but I'm really happy that Caitlin can gather it. We'll go here and fill in any details that I need here. And we'll start as an attorney with a disclaimer that this is not legal advice, but it's informational. If you have anything come up, obviously reach out to an attorney that your club has or that you have connections to or whatever else. Usually this presentation, I've made it a few times, and then we have 3 attorneys at U.S. Soccer, so that's why they will also make it. And the thing that Lydia or Greg or Leah always say is like, they work for the federation as attorneys, so that's their client, if you will. So just keep that in mind that we can't really offer legal advice to not only all of our members, of which there's 107, but to then all our members. So key things for today. This is changing a lot. How much am I blocking this screen, by the way, by standing right here? Good? All right. There are changes to the point where we are of the understanding that some of the key information in this is going to be different in about 3 weeks than it is right now, just because the U.S. Center for Safe Sports is constantly talking about things, the way that it's a federal law and how it's being interpreted and applied in different places is also changing. Not to mention that every single state has its own mandatory reporting and other policies for trying to prevent child abuse, level of child sexual abuse. So it's a constantly changing thing. We're trying to stay on top of it and get the messaging out to our members as much as we possibly can so that they can get it out to you. And that's the main reason why, when we're able and we're asked, we try and come to these type of events to make sure that all of you feel informed and communicated with directly. So, things we're going to go over, we're going to talk about the Center for Safe Sport, which is located in Denver. We're going to talk about the Safe Sport Authorization Act. That's its official congressional name. We call it the Safe Sport Act. There is a federal law. It was signed into law about a year ago. And then the last 2 things are our program that we put into place, and there's 2 pieces of it. One is the program that we run for our development academy, our national teams, and our staff and our board of directors. And then the other piece is this athlete and participant safety policy, which is in our bylaws and policies that all of our members are required to adhere to, such as Colorado Soccer. So, and I know I have technically 40 minutes, so I'm not going to blaze through this, but there will be certain slides where I'm not going to read them verbatim. So, the Center for Safe Sport was launched in 2017. It's independent of the USOC, so similar to the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. It started off as being part of the USOC and then was basically spun off, so that way they have more autonomy. They do 2 main things. They do specialized education on preventing sexual abuse, reporting abuse, and then also emotional misconduct, hazing, bullying, and the like. And then the other piece is that they have policies, and then they have an entire investigatory team that looks into said policies, and then with the hopefulness of finding ways to penalize and punish and prevent those individuals from continuing on and doing any type of untruthful things. So yeah, it's independent. It does receive funding. The majority of its funding from Congress, but then also NGVs pay into it. We pay into it, and we've had actually a couple sponsors. The NBA is just donating money to it on a positive note. I know Lydia's been poking MLS, and she wants them to be one of those entities that's also supporting the Safe Sports Center. So, let's get no. All right. So when we start talking about what they have jurisdiction over, there are 2 things. They have exclusive jurisdiction over any sexualized misconduct, and then they have subject matter jurisdiction over discretionary jurisdiction over the physical misconduct, emotional misconduct, bullying, hazing, and in non-sexual harassment. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that when we say this center has subject matter jurisdiction, this is over what they consider a covered entity, and that's based on each definition that an NGV has. So as you see here, we start talking about covered personnel. The covered personnel per U.S. Soccer, which we worked with the Center for Safe Sport, are national team, development academy, national level referees, and then staff and board of directors. So this slide really only applies to that first group of people there, if you will. So they don't necessarily have subject matter jurisdiction over all of you unless you are working for a club that isn't part of the development academy or you're a national level referee. But the way to look at this is, for us, if we unfortunately get a report of any of these sexualized misconduct allegations, we immediately have to report it to the Safe Sport Center, and then we're hands off, because they handle everything from there. They handle the investigation, they handle any type of hearing, they handle appeals and everything and the like. If we have one of these other discretionary jurisdiction issues, we will report it. The odds of them telling us that they will handle it are very slim, unless it is something where there is a clear conflict of interest. There we go. For us to be reporting something, so let's do a very ridiculous thing. If the person at our office who is responsible for investigating and applying our policy regarding, bullying and hazing is the person who's being accused of bullying and hazing, the Center for Safe Sport would likely be the ones who would step in and handle that. So, key thing there is that we talk about, what does this mean for you all in the room? Like I said, what the Safe Sport Center does is that you don't fall under their exclusive jurisdiction. That is something that could change in the near future. But right now, your connection to the Safe Sport Center, if you will, is the fact that you can get free training from them. It's a 90-minute training. We have a code and a link that we send out to all of our members so that pass on to you all, so that way you can take that training. It is 90 minutes, but it's really well done. It covers all of these topics in 3 different modules, including one that is talking about being a mandatory reporter, so that way you understand what your obligations are under federal law. Anything on the center specifically, because then we're gonna, it's all like connected, but it's a little fragmented in a way, but there's some clear portions here where I can stop and take questions before we go. Yeah? Yeah.
So, just to be clear, if, let's say, we're a local club, we're playing at a U.S. soccer sanctioned event, we have a tournament we're in, a U.S. soccer employee witnesses something, they report to the center. If we as a local club are just playing in a game and we witness something, we obviously need to do something, but we don't, our club doesn't report to this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. So the way that would work is, you would want to report to local law enforcement, right? Because you're a mandatory reporter. And then from there, do you guys want to tag in?
Yeah, I think what CSA would like all of our member clubs to do is anytime there's a reportable event, to report it to CSA.
Gotcha.
Okay, and then we will then do what's necessary to report it to local law enforcement, potentially U.S. Center for Safe Sport if we deem it appropriate. And I think the benefit to that to all the local clubs is, one, it discharges your reporting requirement. Okay, you've reported, you've satisfied it, right? You've satisfied that duty by reporting it to CSA, and at that point in time, CSA will then further send it to local law enforcement or those other organizations. Jeff, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's Caleb Meyer and Catherine Kuss, the board members and attorneys, working on that. And I just realized we haven't introduced them, and they're not random street people who wander in.
So that's good. So
does that answer your question?
I think so. So the reporting process, the immediate reporting process should be to CSA, and then CSA will notify local enforcement. We shouldn't be picking up calling 911 or anything. Obviously, unless it's
unless it's something where it's like an active, like you see somebody taking a child away, where you're like, I don't feel comfortable with that.
Don't take the extra step to call us.
Right. No, but I'm saying, let's say a parent comes and says, hey, I have a situation, I think somebody blah, blah, blah. We call CSA, and then CSA takes it from there. So will there be a phone call? Is there going to be a form, or do we have a checklist of things we need to collect?
Probably, at this point, we don't have a form yet. I think a phone call first and probably a follow-up, an email, something in writing to document the report so it protects you down the road. Because what you'll see, I think further in the slide is that these slides is that there are the new Safe Sport Act, essentially. It contains potentially criminal penalties for people who are not reporting. And so you want to do everything you can to document that you've complied with that reporting requirement. That probably means something in writing. Always a phone call, but then always something in writing to document that.
Yeah. And I think it makes total sense to try and go through CSA. But the one thing to keep in mind is there is no such thing as over-reporting something here. If it's, it's a weekend and you're not sure, and you make a phone call and then you make an email and you're just, again, there's something that doesn't sit right and you're calling local law enforcement, there's nothing wrong with doing that. One of the things that we are seeing with some of these types of allegations or just, concerns is that it doesn't necessarily, it's twofold. It's A, local law enforcement isn't as aware of this law, so they're like, why are you calling us? Do you have a name of a victim? Do you have this? Do you have that? And it's really like, no, but I have this hunch that something is going poorly and I need to do something about it. The other piece of it is, so they don't know about the reporting requirement, and then you don't have enough information for them to actually file a report and, like, quote unquote, do anything with it. So that's why if you're going to local law enforcement, great. If you're going through CSA, great, because they can then come to us, and we have connections all over the country between, FBI, local child health and welfare, and whatever else you can look into to then make sure that you're meeting them.
And I think, that's one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to, what you'll probably see is that there's a whole lot of what constitutes a reportable event. There's a whole lot of gray area in that. I mean, that could be construed and interpreted to be a coach who's yelling at, yelling within their official capacity at kids in an event. And so, is that a reportable event? It may be. That's the problem with the law, is that there's so much gray area. So by reporting it to CSA, right, we're familiar with all of what's going on here, and I think we can help probably vet what needs to be further reported and to whom.
Right, okay.
Unless it's something that's so blatantly obvious that police need to know right away.
Yeah, where you're like, I am not okay with this child being in this situation, and I need somebody to remove him or her from it.
It can be simple: date, time, location, circumstance.
Exactly.
Is there a specific person that we're supposed to contact? Like, I mean, if something happened at a tournament and we can't get a hold of somebody at CSA, then we need to have our coaches and everybody have a specific number of contact. Otherwise, you're waiting until Tuesday.
Right.
So is there, where's that line?
Yeah, probably the local, some of it may depend probably on the circumstances of if it's that egregious, it's something that has to be done immediately. Probably calling local law enforcement right away is the answer. We at CSA probably need, that's something that we need to articulate to all of our member clubs is designating potentially a resource that can be contacted 24 hours a day on weekends, because most of these events happen on weekends outside of our business hours, but that's something that CSA will need to create, and communicate to everyone so there's clear identification of that.
Okay, anything else before we jump into federal law a little bit? Sorry, it's like a law school lecture. Getting flashbacks of PTSD. All right, so the Safe Sport Act was signed into law, like I said, just about a year ago. It was Valentine's Day of 2018. So there's two parts to the law. I'm going to skip to the second one because we kind of already talked about the Safe Sport Center. It basically created and authorized the Safe Sport Center to handle these types of things in regards to having subject matter jurisdiction over NGBs. So there's that. Again, we just spoke on all that fun stuff, so I'll set that aside. The more pertinent part is that it amended what was a Child Abuse Act and expanded the definition of who a mandatory reporter is. So we all know general mandatory reporters. medical personnel, teachers, counselors, and the like, social workers, etc. We're always mandatory reporters. And now it's expanded that to the sports world, in essence. So we'll get to who a mandatory reporter is now. But since it's expanded that definition, it also added a layer of now it's a federal offense if you are a mandatory reporter and you don't meet your obligation under the law to make said report. So those are the two pieces to it. So like I said, the summary of the reporting obligations, this is the important one. So that's what we're talking about. Who are those individuals? That would be a covered individual. We'll talk about that definition. What you're reporting is that you have facts that give reason to suspect a child has suffered an incident of child abuse. So again, that's not certainty, that's not witnessing, that's not verifying or any of the like. That's just you have facts that give rise to a reasonable suspicion. So the when is as soon as possible. We've kind of gone with the idea of like within 24 hours. So again, to the point of if a tournament's on Saturday, you're like, I'm gonna wait till Monday when the office opens. Probably not the right thing to do when they say as soon as possible. You want to be able to have that report being met within 24 hours. Is the way that we do that. And then where, this is where things get a little wonky. So it's to the agency designated by the Attorney General. Do we even have an Attorney General right now? I don't even remember. Didn't think so, but again, we're not going to get into that. But that's a perfect example of where this is how the law was written. It was written when Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General. He was never able to take the time to figure out who that entity should be. And so we've kind of said, all right, here's what makes sense when you talk about to an agency who it should be reported to. So the first one is, like I said, law enforcement or any agency required under state law. Do you guys have any state law requirements for a reporting agency, or is it?
No. So the Colorado, it's important to be aware Colorado has its own statute for mandatory reporting, and the federal law actually says you have to comply with each of your own state laws as well as this now. So you're sort of bound by both state and federal law. But and you can write this statute down. Not that you want to, if you have trouble going to sleep at night, you can read it. But it's Colorado Revised Statute 19-3-304.
3-304.
Yeah. And it doesn't specifically, it basically talks about the reporting agency should be a local law enforcement agency. So it's it's as general as that.
Yeah. Whereas Pennsylvania, after the Jerry Sandusky incident, they amended their state law where there is a mandatory reporting to, a child abuse or social services organization within the state. So yeah, it's always got to make sure that you're meeting those requirements. If Michigan doesn't have one already, I'm pretty sure they're close to updating what their requirement is as far as mandatory reporting in a specific agency and designated, make sure that you're reporting to those individuals as well. So again, law enforcement and then any agency required under state law. We do have the Center for Safe Sport up here. If you meet one of those requirements, so if any of you, like I said, are part of the Development Academy Club, I would, in lieu of making sure that you're meeting your obligation, send it to them. We have had instances where we've had reports sent into the center from clubs that aren't necessarily under the exclusive subject matter jurisdiction. That's not necessarily a problem. Usually what happens is we get an email from the center saying, hey, we got this, U.S. Soccer, make sure you're aware of it, but also note that it appears that they do not fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of the State Sports Center. Handle it as you will. So for you all, I would say that's a U.S. Center for Safe Sports / report to CSA, as we discussed. And then U.S. Soccer is the other one. We have an integrity hotline. We have an integrity email address that you can hit both of those up. We also have legal@ussoccer.org that you can email. And then the other piece of that is I'm sure that if and when a report gets sent into CSA, it'll get sent to us because it's not just a state association. It could be somebody who then is also working or being assigned referee games with the U.S. club type league. So we want to make sure that we're getting it out to them to say, hey, U.S. club, make sure that this individual is no longer around or permitted to interact with children at this point until we get it worked out anyway, so et cetera. I would say adult, but since you guys are a joint state association, the adult state association piece doesn't fit in. So that's where As far as local law enforcement, go to CSA. CSA will either come to us, or like I said, if there's something where it's a weekend and you're stressed and you want to make sure, and you have questions, you can always go to our integrity hotline. I'm pretty sure that of our 3 attorneys that we have in-house, somebody's constantly monitoring that, especially if you hit a few key button, words in the subject line of an email, where it's, I need some assistance immediately regarding, safe sport or whatever else, then somebody will take a look into that. And then the other piece is when we talk about, immunity for good faith reporting. So again, it's good faith reporting. It's not, I'm mad at this coach because my kid didn't play this weekend, and so now I'm going to report them in. You don't get immunity for that. You get immunity when you're seeing something and you're going, it doesn't sit right. I don't like the way that individual and that coach are interacting. It doesn't feel right to me. There's just something that I'm not okay with. And so I'm going to report this to make sure that in that way I'm covering my bases as we go forward. All right.
And just to add, look, I know we talked about the law enforcement, but there is a Colorado State Child Abuse Hotline that you can also contact and satisfy some reporting.
Yeah, if they have, if they have an online.
They do, the phone number hotline is 1-844-CO-4-kids.
So great. So then you're also if it's one of those where you try and contact local law enforcement and they say something's defective, we don't have enough to issue a report, then you can also make that call and say, all right, now I've contacted local law enforcement and I contacted Colorado Child Abuse Services and CSA. At this point, I've hit, here are all the things that I did to meet my requirements as a mandatory reporter and my good faith reporting obligations. And then beyond the reporting, you can be covered by the Act in one of 2 ways. When we say covered by the Act, there's other pieces to that regarding education and prevention policies and all that. So one part is reporting, and the other part is the prevention and education pieces of it. So again, there's 2 ways to be covered. You either have NGB jurisdiction, which those all look familiar, and then, or you can be, according to the Act, an applicable amateur sports organization, of which, if I were to venture a guess, every single one of you in this room meets one of those 2. As far as you participate in interstate or international, so if you leave Colorado to go participate in any type of tournament, you would meet it. But the other one is any adult in regular contact with an amateur athlete who is a minor. So within your organization, I'm pretty sure all of your coaches are adults and they're all authorized to interact with minors. So you meet the requirements from a reporting standpoint, but then also this upcoming education and prevention type stuff. Volunteers too as well. If you are an authorized adult, then you're there. It's not necessarily being paid, volunteer, independent contractor, employment, whatever else. If you are a parent chaperone where the club says, hey, 10 of us are driving vans to go to whatever tournament, you have now been authorized by an amateur sports organization to be in contact with minors that are not your children. Yeah.
Question. I don't know about everybody else's bylaws, but our nonprofit bylaw considers any family that pays a fee in the club as a quote member of the club. Does that make them then all our parents technically become authorized individuals?
We've talked about that. It's a fun one. Because it's where you draw the line, because then you start going, okay, well then all the kids, we say siblings who are above 18 who may or may not be showing up to a game, does that make them not only mandatory reporters, but then education and whatever else? I think, again, it's constantly changing. We'll see type deal, but I think there's something to be said about trying to get education and prevention information out more broadly rather than less broadly. Good question.
The problem, it's a good question, and the reason why if they are, then basically what happens is every parent who has a club has to go through background checks, concussion training policy, and the 90-minute safe sport, and they have to, we'll talk about this part at the end with how we're doing this within CSA, but sort of we have this process that coaches are going to have to do that before they can be on a roster. They have to go through those things, but arguably, if this is so broad as to include parents now, then potentially they would have to go through the same thing before their kid can be on a roster.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, there's not an answer, I don't think, specifically about that yet, but it has potential huge ramifications for what parents have to do.
Yeah, I don't want to say this, as a throwaway, but it's the idea of Everybody wants kids to be safe. Everybody wants to prevent any of these horrible things that we're hearing about from happening ever again. And then we can do as much as we possibly can, but then everybody will stop playing sports if it's, well, all of a sudden if I sign my kid up for soccer, I'm a mandatory reporter as an adult, and I just as a parent, not to even just talk about getting my kid on a soccer field, now I have to pay X amount of dollars for background checks, spend 90 minutes in notice. So there's a tipping point. You know, it's no different than, you know, I live in Chicago, it's very safe where I live, but if you don't understand it, then people are like, oh, you live in Chicago, there's so much crime there. And I'm like, yeah, but I also could be crossing Michigan Avenue and get hit by a bus in Mag Mile, which is a very safe place to be. So when do you stop, you know, living to then that way prevent something from ever happening? So I think, I get what you're saying as far as like, that you consider them a member, so then are they technically authorized? I think if they're authorized to do something beyond just being the parent of a child on a field, then I would hit that level of being mandatory reporter and you want to look into education and prevention. But as far as just, you signed your kid up for soccer and now you're going to be in the sidelines, does it necessarily hit those? I don't know. I feel like there's an argument to be made that you're not, because again, that's just the way that you guys organize your club versus a club down the street where you still have the same parent information. You don't necessarily call them members of the club from a parent standpoint, and then they don't meet that same requirement. Okay, so as I said, then you have the beyond reporting obligations. So then, as an applicable amateur sports organization, these are the other pieces that are required by federal law. Meet the reporting requirements, we talked about that. Establish reasonable procedures to limit one-on-one interaction between an amateur athlete and an adult who is not their parent. Now, limiting one-on-one, so that's something as simple as, it's a lot more difficult in those individual sports. So when you're talking about, you know, a lot of those smaller NGBs, or even like, you know, skiing, figure skating, gymnastics to a certain extent, soccer, it's not, you're not seeing as much one-on-one interaction between a coach and a player. Now, you could have a coach and a player have a conversation after a game because they want to talk about more playing time or this or that or whatever else. When we say limit one-on-one interactions, have those in a public space, out in the open, have a second adult there or within hearing understanding. Don't have it in an office with the door closed. Have it be an interruptible space when we talk about limiting one-on-one interactions. And then offer and provide consistent training to your adult members. So again, the Safe Sport training is free for all of you. We have a code that CSA has that gets it completely free. It's 90 minutes of your time. You can offer that. Notice how it doesn't say that it has to be Safe Sport training. There are other types of training that are out there as far as abuse prevention system is one that I know US Youth and State Associations have been using for a while. It's very good. The only thing it's quote unquote missing is the emotional misconduct, bullying, hazing type stuff. But it does hit all of the other sexual misconduct, reporting, you know, grooming behaviors and those types of things. And then prohibit retaliation by somebody who's a good faith reporter is the other piece of that. So that's under federal law. Questions about the federal law part of it? Because then we're going to shift into what we've tried to do to make this slightly easier for all of you, because it's a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I would just say one thing about the members and the adults, because I do come from figure skating, so this has been out for like a long time in that realm, but is that it's more of a recommendation that everyone who's an adult is reporting, and Safe Sport is an avenue to do that, as are all the other aforementioned. But your people in direct contact with your kids, your coaches, volunteers, team managers, chaperones, are required reporters. So it would be more of maybe a distinction as a recommendation that everyone is a reporter, and we would just hope that in the good-natured people that we would say something. But if a policy was to be printed, you know, that's a good way to differentiate that. Just a member, just a parent, has no requirement to do that. We would just recommend that they would.
Yeah.
You would hope people would do that anyway, but.
Exactly. That makes sense, and then also it's the difference between just being a member and then being an authorized adult to interact with minors, which would be a volunteer coach, referee, chaperone, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so again, I know this is a lot of information, so this is what we've tried to do to make it a little easier again for our members and then for all of you. So bylaw 212 is always required. It's basically our membership requirements. You can go through it. It talks about all different types of things that our members have to do being a member of US Soccer or any other organization. So we talk about things like you need to follow our bylaws and policies, and you need to follow the applicable law, which would include the Safe Sport Act. We already already said that you had to have a policy that prohibited sexual abuse in there. And then we also said that you had to have a risk management program if you had, if you were basically authorizing or holding competitions and authorizing adults. So we had those things already. So what we did though is this policy 212-3, it adds a few more things. It adds the framework for making sure that there is compliance with the federal law and trying to spell it out a little bit more for everybody. It gives you template policies to encourage consistency. So again, you as an organization, if you're like, okay, so we need to put together a policy to limit one-on-one interactions between coaches or between adults and minors, great, we have one of those. That's what this policy did. You can go on our website, find it, pull it, look at it, see if there's anything that you need to tailor it, just given your organization, what your facilities are, and go from there. Same thing with like a social media policy. We are of the opinion and encourage that you should have a policy where you never have a coach texting a kid directly. It's either the parent is on there, you're either texting the entire team, it's not happening late at night. You know, there's so many different programs now between Teamworks. I know that's the one that we use to communicate with our national teams as far as making sure that there aren't those one-on-one text messages where then all of a sudden it's, oh, well, coach has been texting players for X amount by themselves without the parent having any idea about it. So that's another example of it. And then again, the specific criteria on stuff that we intend to enforce as far as our members must have the following in place. And then like I said, the key thing though is the policy is a framework, and then it tries to make it a little more clear on what the obligation is, but we're also well aware of the fact that the policies that we have in place for, again, our national teams, our staff, our development academy, doesn't necessarily meet everybody's abilities. So again, if you are a very, you know, our perfect example is like, again, an adult state association where there are no employees and the board is all volunteers and they meet every other month. Having a personal conduct policy is a requirement. Having a personal conduct policy that is the same as our personal conduct policy that's 5 pages long probably isn't something that's reasonable for that organization to have in place. But that doesn't mean that they can't say, this is our personal conduct policy, we prevent, or the following things are prohibited, or else you're going through whatever policy or process that we have in place. Anything before next one?
I would just say that all clubs are required, under the statute, they're required by February of this year to have policies, some of these policies in place, all these policies, mandated policies in place. So to the extent that most clubs do have them already, CSA has them in place, but if your club doesn't, technically you're supposed to have them in place about now. And then in the fall of 2019, everybody's required to have a mandatory safe sport training, or basically equivalent of safe sport training for all of its coaches and members. So one thing I would add to that, if your club has not adopted any of these policies, it's easy to just go and take the one from US Soccer and tailor it however you need, but it's probably very important to make those reflected from your boards in the minutes that those have actually been adopted, so there's a record. And if anybody comes to your club and says, hey, what's your policy? Well, when were these adopted? You have a record of from your board minutes as to when those were done.
Right, so that's why for our members, and then obviously for members it is. It's have the policies in place and then to take effect, later than the fall of 2019. So we put September 1st, 19, knowing that that's generally speaking when most seasons start. Some might start in August, depending on where you're located. But we know that if we said, you need to get your policies in place, you need to start doing them right now. Well, then you have a weird setup where some of your coaches have already done a background check and training, and then you change it, you do something else in the middle of it, tracking and requirements and all that stuff. So get the policies in place and then make sure that they're being followed and there's a compliance with said policies going into the fall 2019 season.
And I think CSA is part of a session tomorrow. Hey Jeff, tomorrow CSA is going to start to send out to clubs sort of a, checklist, if you will, of things that we want to make sure that all of our member clubs have done. This will be one of them.
Yep.
So that'll be more, I think that's addressed tomorrow.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it at the roundtable tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
like compliance with nonprofit, policy adoption, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah. So just making sure you have a record of adoption and policies in board minutes would be ideal.
Okay, so this policy 212-3 for us, this is what it actually says, and again, it's a requirement for applicable sports or amateur sports organization, which any youth soccer club is an applicable sports organization, just based on the participants involved. So again, you need to have a prohibited conduct policy. That's, you know, as I said, ours is 5 pages long. You can take it. The first paragraph is a little more like concise as far as these are the things that we prohibit, and will, you know, start a process in which you were either fired immediately or eventually will be. And then it's 4.5 more pages going into detail about the type of things that can also get you into that bucket. Appropriate background screening. So again, I think most of you probably do some type of background checks anyway. We use NCSI. Yeah, because NCIS is the show. Who's thinking about that? It's the Cadillac of background checks, but it's also insanely expensive for us. So knowing full well, it's not easy for us to go, everybody must do this background check, because again, we're gonna, instead of increasing participation, we're gonna decrease it, because clubs are gonna be like, we can't afford to pay X amount of dollars for every single person to get a background check. Now we're talking about additional efforts regarding background screening, as far as can we get to a point, even from a national standpoint, as far as these are the minimum requirements for a background screening, whether it's just checking your you know, sexual offenders list, doing a general background check with the police department or whoever else that you're working with.
Is there any way that U.S. Soccer can go to every one of these things and say, we have to have one reporting or one background check? Because ECNL has one that takes like 6 or 7 hours, then the DA has one, then CYS has one. It is a nightmare. So one person, one of our coaches has to go through 3 different background checks for one team.
Yeah, so there's two things that we're working on with that. One is that we do have the risk management safe sport working group of the youth task force, and that's one of the things that they're talking about, as far as can we get to a point where we at least have a recommended, this is what everybody's doing from a background check standpoint. The issue though is that it will always be recommended because state laws. So Pennsylvania, again, is a great example. They require everybody now to get an FBI background check because of Jerry Sandusky. So we can never really get to it unless we want to say, okay, here are all the state requirements. So we can't get to a point where we say on a national level, this is what everybody must do. We can say this is a best practice that we put in place, and then that way there's buy-in from all of the organizations as far as, like you said, so in that way, ECNL and CSA and AYSO and whatever else is taking place in this state, you can say, all right, we're all going to use this background check in Colorado because it meets all of our requirements, and then it also meets state law. But will we ever get to a point from a national standpoint? No, just because, again, there's 50 different states and they all have different laws that we're looking at. You had something?
Yeah, it's along these lines. I kind of spoke to Nate about it earlier. We have a lot of coaches that not only coach for our club, but coach for the school district. And we have volunteers for our club that volunteer in the school district. And our school district provides a FBI complete background check that they go through. I went through it myself. It's along those lines. They get the full FBI national thing. They still got to go through this, is what you're saying? Or
I would say, I don't necessarily think that you have to, because if that's the appropriate background screening, you can get to the point where you are also able to get that same background screening. Now, there's a difference between, I know they went through the screening and then now I have been handed said report of the screening, versus somebody saying, no, I got cleared by a school district, I'm good.
Gotcha, no, it's a communication on the
Right,
back end.
exactly, or how do you reconcile, thank you. How do you reconcile those two things so you're right? You're not saying, hey, this person went through the highest level of screening to be a public school teacher, including an FBI background check, but I'm still going to charge them $15 to do whatever background check means we have to do it. But I think there is a way to reconcile that. And again, it's one of those things, that's why that working group of the youth task force is trying to come to a more clear place on how we can roll the background checks.
For CSA, I would say, because we have to cast that net for everybody who that may not apply, who's already done that with the school district or whatever, then our policies will be made, our policy will probably be the same. You have to go through the background check that CSA requires until we can get to a point where we can account for all of those nuances with those people. So.
You already do. I have the same situation, and you guys make the coach go through it again. CSA makes you go through it, the regular one.
Right.
Even with the teacher certification one.
Yep.
I have a similar scenario. They make you do both.
And the reason, of course, is that when we used to have the varying ones, or you could choose it or whatever, boy, some of them were, you get what you pay for. So you try to go cheap, some of them were just like awful. One we used, I had one guy come in, he'd been cleared by the Catholic Church, and then we picked up on it, so we were pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Okay, so beyond background screening, again, training and education, all of you can do safe sport training for free. You can do abuse prevention system. So again, our thing is that you have to have a training and education process feature requirement. What that is not necessarily not what that is. Like which organization you get that through is up to you to a certain place. We will always recommend the Safe Sport Center one, A, because it's free, and B, because it's the center that's putting it together. But at the same time, if you have a different one, just make sure that it's hitting all of those requirements. Reporting, again, helping participants understand who they need to call if they see something, and then also that there is no retaliation from that piece, and then also the monitoring and enforcement. If you have a situation in which you are have somebody who's been reported to local law enforcement, make sure you're telling CSA so they can tell us, and that way we can put it on a risk management list, and or once it gets to a final resolution as far as a local club has now suspended this coach for 3 years due to grooming behaviors, we're going to report that to Safe Sports Center, so then that way said coach can't just go be a swim coach or a volleyball coach or a baseball coach without somebody being able to check that list.
And CSA's made it easy in terms of you all don't have to go and choose those. So the way that the way CSA is doing it is it's all going to be run through Got Soccer in sort of a one-stop shop checklist where you get to the page and it's background check here. And once that's done, you go to the concussion training. Once that's done, then you go to Safe Sport, and that consists of the 3 30-minute sessions. And you will not be allowed to be on a roster until those are completed. So it's all boom, 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 all on Got Soccer. And CSA, Nate will have the ability then to get reports through Got Soccer to say if a coach from a club comes and says, well, why isn't this coach on the roster? And we can go right away and say, well, they did the background check and the concussion, but they didn't finish the last 30 minutes of the Safe Sport training. So we as an association have already chosen the Safe Sport training for all of you to do because it's sort of the standard and it's easy and it's free and it's comprehensive. So
3 things: easy, free, comprehensive. Those are what we like. And then again, I talked about the model policies. So these were created by the U.S. Center for Safe Sport with input from the NGPs. So all of those policies, like I said, we were talking about interactions, massages and athletic training therapies, locker room, social media, local travel, team travel, all those things. There are policies that we have that you can, again, literally copy and paste, or at least use as a resource and say, well, we don't really need to have a locker room policy per se because we don't have locker rooms at our facility. Now, I personally think you should just leave that in there because you never know when you're going to be at a facility that does have a locker room. So why not just keep that in there? So in the instance in which you find yourself in a locker room, then that policy is in place and clear. And then this is again what we did. So we have the Safe Soccer framework. It's at safesoccer.com. It is in essence we're adopting the Safe Soccer framework, and now we're automatically meeting the policy 212-3, which therefore meets federal law. So again, you're not required to adopt all of the Safe Soccer framework. You're just required to have those pieces in place. But again, it's a public website. Anybody can go to safesoccer.com. It has a whole bunch of information on there. It has all of the model policies. It has the full Safe Soccer framework that we have in place, which again, is what we have adopted for the Development Academy and national teams and staff and board of U.S. Soccer. All of that is available online. It has a link to our integrity hotlines. Yeah, it's lovely. It's a little, it's pretty legitimate. The edits on this were a great time, let me tell you. But it has a link to our integrity hotline. So if you are wondering how or where to report, if you can't find it on our direct website, which is if you go to ussoccer.com, just scroll to the bottom, it's there. But it's linked there. The Center for Safe Sport and reporting something to them, there's also a link directly there. So we've tried to put as much as we can on that website, so then that way that Safe Soccer framework or safesoccer.com is somewhere where you can go as a resource, again, to the meeting federal law that has meeting U.S. soccer policies. Okay, and then if anybody wants to see it, yeah, there you go. So there's safesoccer.com. Like I said, you can report a concern. There's the integrity.
Sorry, back.
Whatever. Y'all can go on your phones right now. But it is on the right-hand corner. There's a link to the hotline, which is both a phone number and a email report that you can fill out. It takes you directly to Safe Sport. The Safe Sport training is right there as well that you can go to. And then we put together a long FAQ document for some of the other questions that we were seeing from members and then also the clubs. That's fascinating. Yeah, it was like under 5 minutes over. Okay, that's a lot of information we threw in 40-ish minutes. Questions? All right, so I'm really good at this and I never have to do another one. Awesome. Yeah, what's up, Jeff? What does Safe Sport get at here?
If anyone has questions that come up, you can always email Kathy or myself or contact CSA, and we can help you navigate through this stuff.
How often do those 3 components need to be completed by the coaches? Background checks used to be every 2 years. Is that 2 years?
2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Same with concussion training.
Yeah. And the one thing I did mention is that, so Safe Sport is 90 minutes, but they have a refresher course that's 30 minutes. So our thing is, I believe, unless they change it at the Federation, which is fine, and I'll just spend 90 minutes listening to and doing the course again. They have us a 90-minute, and then every year that we're supposed to take, every other year we take that and take the refresher in between.
So will Scott Soccer be updated so that as we add coaches, it'll know within 2 years?
Yeah, so there may be a lot of examples where people are in the middle of their 2 years for the the background check and the concussion. So everyone will for sure have to do, starting by fall, the Safe Sport training to get up to speed. But after that, it's every 2 years for all of them, really.
Yeah, and all of the technology companies, including Got Soccer, have been working with the center directly, not the center, but the center's technology people to then create an API so that way it's a little more automated. Right now, the only way for us to make sure that somebody's done Safe Sport is to search a database of anybody who's taken Safe Sport using our unique codes. And that's the other thing is once you get that code, don't post it online, don't put it on the club website. If you do that, Safe Sport will come to us and then I'll have to go to you call so-and-so and tell them to take that down. You can distribute it, you just can't post it. And if you have questions about some ways that we've been able to get around that, because people are like, we have so many coaches, if we don't post it, how are they going to get access to it? We've done a whole bunch of different things where, if you register to be a coach, then in your confirmation email, then the code is there. They created an email address that literally would have an auto reply of here's what the code is. If you email that address, then it comes back to you. Because again, that's $25 for anybody else in the general public who takes it. It's a benefit for our members. We just don't need it or want it to be a benefit for every single person out there. And we also don't want to be responsible for baseball, volleyball, figure skating, swimming, gymnastics, and anybody else. If they're like, oh yeah, just take this code, because then they end up on the U.S. Soccer list for people who have taken Safe Sport and dealing with APIs and not the list of their actual NGB. If they're affiliated with another NGB, they should be able to go directly to them and get that code as it stands. Yeah, Jeff?
Just curious, and esoteric, are you going to try to work to get the U.S. qualify as a darn to the U.S. soccer?
I don't believe so.
Just gonna say, I don't believe, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, anything like that would be, a policy decision with, Lydia and Dan, and anybody, and probably our risk audit and compliance group. And then the other piece of that is it would be a technology question, neither one of which are my forte.
Okay, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
We should probably double check all of that.
Any other questions? Awesome. All right. Well, as I said this morning, if something comes up and you have a question, you can absolutely go directly to me, Jeff, Kathy. They know how to get in touch with us in a multitude of ways on this specific topic. And appreciate you all coming in here. It's not a fun thing to talk about, but a necessary thing that we all need to talk about and be aware of, so that way we can prevent these things from happening rather than talking about ways in which we need to report them and stay awesome. Thank you.
What we do is we
Great to see you.
Yeah, it's been good. Everyone's been able to do it well. Yeah, everybody's she's been sending the X Games.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Playing around and all the things that they have there. Skateboard. It's a skateboard. So I'm happy with that.
She's exactly whether it's spring. Yesterday. That's Friday, first day of the stuff.
It's not a very busy weekend. Yeah, good economy and quality people. It's a busy weekend. Everybody's great.
So at the very least, we know Dave's getting that.
These guys are, these guys are.
Probably better that way.